hold off for just a few more seconds while people are joining, and then we'll jump right in. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining this online session for the Christina Lake zoning bylaw update. So this is an online version of the public meeting that we held yesterday at Christina Lake. So I'm going to start with a hopefully 15-minute presentation just to go over some of the details of the bylaw. And then afterwards, we'll have group question and answers. All right, welcome everybody to this Christina Lake zoning bylaw update public meeting. So this is the online version of the meeting that we held yesterday at Christina Lake. And we're going to start today with a 15-minute presentation, just going over some of the bits of the bylaw that is under bylaw update and review. And then we'll go into some question and answers. So just starting with some technical details, we will be recording this meeting and then we'll make that publicly available. So at this time, if you're not comfortable with being on a recorded meeting, then you'll need to pop off. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay on, and then we'll be sharing the recording video on the Join the Conversation page. So in terms of participation today, everybody should have their mics and videos off for now. And then after the presentation, if you raise your hand, then we will open up your microphone so that you're able to speak. And then we also have at the top of the screen a Q&A. So if you wanted to type in your questions instead of vocalizing them, you can do that as well, or type in comments as well. And the questions will be read out by our meeting facilitator, Jeff, after the presentation, and then I'll answer. In terms of other feedback besides the Q&A online here and speaking at this meeting, you can also email us or drop off a letter to our office. And this meeting is not the last meeting on this subject. We will be holding a public hearing at a later date. And you'd all folks be welcome to join in and speak or write in at that time as well. So the zoning bylaw update for Christina Lake, this is something that's coming out of the OCP bylaw that was adopted in April of 2024. So we updated that official community plan document, and then following that wanted to launch the redraft of the zoning bylaw to follow suit with what was in the OCP. So some of you folks probably were at the open house in October where we had a draft bylaw, and then this is the next set of meetings where we've updated that draft and are presenting that for further feedback. And the next steps, we would then take additional feedback and update the draft, and then try to initiate the formal process of the bylaw going for readings and a public hearing. So the zoning bylaw is different than the OCP, but they are related. And essentially, the official community plan is this overarching kind of umbrella document that all the other bylaws must be under and be consistent with. So essentially what we're trying to do is align with the objectives and policies that are in that overarching umbrella document and all the directions that it gave in terms of zoning. So updating the maps to align with the OCP land use designations, any explicit directives that were given in the OCP, or any of the descriptions in terms of what's to be allowed where are then all incorporated into the zoning bylaw, which is the regulatory document as opposed to the one that provides the vision and structure. So zoning is, simply put, a set of regulations for different uses, densities, siting, building sizes, and lot sizes in an area. And essentially the premise is that a zone or part of a zone can be different from another. So in terms of dividing a land area into different pieces of the pie, and then each of those pieces of the pie having different rules set and applied to them. Zoning can also include regulations for things like parking and signs and landscaping, as well as use and density and how big a lot size can be when it's subdivided. The draft bylaw, which is available on the Join the Conversation page, if you want to check out the draft, there's kind of 6 main parts to the bylaw. The first 2 are kind of setting the general foundation in terms of definitions and how to read the bylaw and what it applies to and so on. And then part 3 is our general regulations. And the general regulations are the rules that are generally applied everywhere. So it's a pretty important part of the document, but one that people tend to not read as much as some of the other sections. Part 4 is the supplemental regulations. So these are kind of really detailed rules around certain scenarios or uses. And part 5 is our parking. So what to do about vehicles, how much parking is required. And then what most people think of in terms of zoning is part 6, which are the actual zones. And those are laying out the rules for a particular area, things like uses, densities, setbacks, what you would traditionally think of as zoning is in that part 6, but they all are interlinked together, and you need to be looking basically at all of those sections and complying with each one of them, and they do kind of all work in tandem. In terms of the zoning bylaw draft that is available, there are mapping updates. And so what these mapping updates are trying to do is essentially translate the official community plan land use designation, which are more general, into the specific zones. So for example, residential being an overarching umbrella land use designation might have more than one zone, differentiating between those. And we're essentially trying to just align what's in identified as in the OCP as residential with a particular zone or commercial or so on. There's also a lot more zones in our current bylaw than there are in the draft because we were trying to simplify things. So we also had to adjust the maps based on translating, all of the residential zones into more broader categories. So now I'm just going to very briefly do a high-level overview of each of those zoning categories. And the bylaw is too detailed to pick up on all of the major points of the bylaw. So this is just to kind of give a general overview and maybe touch upon some of the points that that are more of a change than just shifting things around and more of the administration part. So starting with residential zones, this is the R1 and the R2 zone and the rural residential 3 zone. So we consolidated from 7 residential zones into 3. And then there was some changes to sleeping quarters being allowed on parcels 1 hectare or larger. And then generally similar regulations and uses, except for lake access road ends, minimum building widths being removed, and boarding house use being removed because it was redundant. The rural zones are just have the rural 1 zone. So following the OCP, there is an increase of minimum parcel size if you're in the ALR to 20 hectares. And then there's also a reduced density from 2 to 1 single family dwelling on parcels that were 20 hectares or larger. And for the most part, similar regulations and uses with some changes to parcel coverage and for ALR properties and removing some uses and as well. The resource zones, these are largely the public lands, which are given their own rural resource 2 zone, which is a new zone, and then renaming them, decreasing the density from 2 to 1 single family dwelling, and then removing some of the uses there. So most of these lands are shown in the darker brown are the publicly owned lands, and then the lighter tan are the privately owned lands, but these are the larger parcels around Christina Lake. And then we also have our commercial zones, and again, we're reducing the number. What we did here was broaden the uses that could be allowed here to allow for more flexibility, because there's a lot of lists of very specific uses that were all quite similar. So we defined those uses and kind of grouped them together to provide some more flexibility on what could be allowed. And then fairly similar regulations, except for increasing the front setback to 4.5 meters to match the minimum setback from the road right of way. Currently, it was at 2. Waterfront commercial, similar kind of things, merging zones together, keeping similar regulations, and then either expanding or clarifying some of the uses. And in this case, we also got rid of the zones that Christina Lake Alpine Resort was in and merged it in with the waterfront commercial. And just 2 properties are in our campground commercial zone. So these are for year-round commercial campgrounds. Most of the regulations were moved to other parts of the bylaw that deals with campgrounds. For industrial, there's not a ton of industrial properties at Christina Lake. I believe it's 4 parcels. So we merged the zones together and then removed a lot of the non-industrial uses from those zones because there's agricultural uses, commercial uses, and even I think some residential uses that then focused the bylaw on more manufacturing and industrial type uses with similar regulations. For the parks and recreation zone, these were renamed, and these are public lands, so I won't go into too much detail here, but there were some changes in terms of shuffling around uses and also allowing a little bit more flexibility for permanent buildings, which weren't previously allowed in the P2 zone, and then adding a height maximum for that. Institutional and community facilities, these are governmentally owned properties, and we brought in the institutional uses with similar regulations. And those were all of the zones. So you have your commercial, industrial, residential, and so on, with all the specifics in there. And we do have a lot of information online for people to compare what is what's in the bylaw now versus the draft bylaw and what's changing, or you can kind of do a comparison yourself. So there's a bit of background information, but we weren't trying to do too many major shifts except for trying to align with the OCP. So now I'm going to talk about the part 3, which is those general regulations. So these are uses that are not allowed anywhere or uses allowed everywhere. There's also some general siting and some exceptions to height or siting or subdivisions, as well as retaining walls in terms of adding in how to handle height when you have tiered retaining walls, how they work together. One of the general regulations that is of note is the 10-meter setback to Christina Lake that's being proposed. So this is an increase from the 7.5 that is currently in the bylaw. And just want to note that we do have an information sheet available about grandfathering because we received some questions about that, and kind of how that works in conjunction with our floodplain bylaw. And one of the topics that came up last night, so it's worth repeating because there'll probably be questions online here, was around the floodplain bylaw. So separate bylaw, separate kind of project. So in terms of what's happening around the lake, the zoning setback is the one that's kind of up for debate right now and as part of this process. And in terms of like how things are considered when they're grandfathered, that info sheet is kind of explaining existing scenarios and how that works. But that's not a proposed change. That's just a document explaining what currently is happening at Christina Lake. We also have some setback exceptions. So we've included more exceptions for that zoning setback to the lake in this redraft based on comments from the last open house. And then part 4 is our supplemental regulations. So these are specific use regulations for things like accessory buildings or signs or kennels, bed and breakfasts. So there are a few that are of note. Secondary suites and accessory dwelling units. So those are new terms, but kind of similar uses to what was allowed before. There's a little bit more flexibility in terms of the suite size because we removed the 40% rule. And we also removed the restriction of owner occupancy in the draft. And then if anybody did attend the last open house or looked at the previous draft, there was a restriction on not having a detached suite or an accessory dwelling unit on parcels that were less than 1 hectare. So that restriction has been removed from this draft. So essentially they're allowed anywhere. We are just asking that they connect to the same septic system as the main house when they're less than 1 hectare on a parcel that's less than 1 hectare. And new to this bylaw too is an additional height to allow for people enough building height to put a suite above a garage. Currently it's restricted to 4.6 meters. So this would be an increase to 7 or 2 stories to allow for a unit above a garage. There are campground regulations that have been adjusted, which I won't go into detail here. And there's also regulations around recreational vehicles. So this was a topic of quite a bit of discussion at last night's meeting and around the no occupancy from mid-October to mid-April that is being proposed in the bylaw. So these are new regulations around the seasonal occupancy by specifying a time period where they can't be occupied. Currently, the bylaw allows only for somebody to occupy an RV on their property for equivalent of 6 months out of the year. And there are some difficulties with enforcement of that regulation. So we were putting in something more specific that would be easier to enforce if need be. There's also addition of essentially when you're occupying it, you'd be putting setbacks similar to what it would be if it was an accessory building. And then some new regulations around keeping it so that it is transportable. There's also new regulations around backyard chickens and backyard beekeeping. And this has been adjusted a bit since the last meeting, increasing the number of hens to 8 and the number of beehives to 6, removing some of the rules. But essentially what this allows is for anybody as an accessory use to their home to to have up to 8 hens, no roosters, or 6 beehives, with some specific setbacks and rules included in the regulations, and then allowing them to sell the eggs or honey or bee products on site. So the last section that we'll be talking about is part 5, and this is the parking loading section. So in terms of what's included here is a simplified table of what the minimum vehicle parking stalls are required on a property for different types of residential, commercial, industrial, or institutional uses. So we have 15 fewer parking categories overall because it was quite complicated before. So we reduced it down to make the calculations easier. And I will just note that there is a new provision for new dwellings to be EV ready for level 2 charging. So not putting the charger in itself, but the outlet capability to be able to do that in the future. So that kind of concludes this kind of very brief overview of the draft bylaw being proposed for Christina Lake. So all of these updates are being driven and meant to align with the objectives and policies that are in the official community plan for Christine Lake, and also provide more clarity and a stronger bylaw overall to make it easier for everybody to read and interpret and be on the same page, which just kind of helps staff, it helps the public, it helps investors, helps politicians to have a clear vision of what isn't allowed in any particular area. So I do say that there is more information available on our Join the Conversation page with the link shown here. And if you want to provide feedback, you can do that today in this meeting, or you can also email us later or post questions and comments on the Join the Conversation page itself if you want other people to be able to see what you're asking. And at this point, I will say thank you for listening and going through that. And I'm going to ask that that Jeff, our moderator, look at any of if there's any Q&A questions. Nobody's posted in there yet that I can see. So then at this point, we just go through everybody that has their hand raised, and then we'll open up microphones. If you do want your video put on while you're talking, you can request that we do that. Otherwise, we'll probably keep the video off and just unmute your microphone, and then we'll just open up to the floor. So just for housekeeping, the raise hand button is up at the top, and when you've clicked it, you'll see your hand next to the box with your initials or person in it, and it should tell you what order you're in as well.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. I will start with person number 1. Your mic is on. You're muted though. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
You're live.
Nice. Hi. I just had a question. I'm in rural 1 zoning, and you guys mentioned I have a few questions. You guys mentioned you removed some, or in this draft there's some uses removed. Could you clarify what those were?
Yeah, I would have to, off the top of my head, probably not the best, but there is a comparison document on the website to go to.
Okay, I can look at that later. I could ask my second question. I can look at that later. My more question that I had to clarify was, so if it's within, what I read is if it's within the ALR, then it's a 20 hectare minimum subdivision now, as opposed to what was a 10. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, I noticed looking at the map I'm up Fife Road, and I don't know about down by the border or Santa Rosa as much, but up here I'm just looking at the map of the ALR. and a lot of people's it's only a portion of people's parcels that would be within the ALR. And so I guess what I'm wondering is if you have, say, less than 20 hectares in the ALR, say you have maybe 5 hectares or whatever, could you subdivide that down to 10 hectares? Or if it touches even a small bit of ALR, does that mean your parcel has to then be still 20 hectares, even if, say, whatever, 19 of them or 18 of them are not in the ALR? Does that question make sense?
I think so. You're saying, like, is it an all or nothing if you have just a little bit in the ALR?
I guess
it's
a
20
question
hectares.
of definition of, yes, within, like what within is defined as, I guess, as it's written. Yes. So if you had less than 20 hectares in the ALR and you couldn't subdivide off 20 full hectares of ALR, but some of your parcel had ALR in it, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I
think it
that.
applies to most people with it, actually, up on this hill. It didn't make really much sense to me how that was done, because I feel like, yeah. Anyway, well, depending on your answer, maybe it doesn't make much sense or does, but yeah.
Yeah, I would have to say that I think that the intention, I'd have to go back and see like how it was written, but I think the intention is that it would be for any new parcels that are within the ALR. So if you did have a parcel that was partially outside of the ALR, we would be applying that 10 hectare rule. So you would need essentially 20 hectares outside of the ALR to divide into 2.
Right. Okay, that makes some sense to me. And I do have a comment. Are comments welcome or only questions?
No, I think comments are very helpful. So I definitely encourage comments. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. My comment is I did go to the Fife meeting. I don't know how many there were, if it was just one or anyway, I went to one of the open house meetings where you guys were gathering information for kind of what each community, each of those kind of zoning areas were looking for. And I felt, there was a little bit of divide about people saying, what the ideal size of a lot is or subdividable parcel, I guess, would be. But I feel like, a lot of the people with the idea of, I think everybody was on board with keeping things pretty rural. And then the question was, well, like, what's rural enough and what density is appropriate to still have the same kind of lifestyle values or whatever it mentions in the community plan and that. But a lot of people were asking for smaller subdivisions. I know, like, a lot of the sentiment, a lot of people are getting older and want to sell their parcels to their kids without causing fighting in the family, if you know what I mean. So be able to subdivide it so that each kind of different people in the family could get it. And I just noticed that kind of the opposite was done in a way, that it was made now kind of harder to subdivide smaller, and like 50-acre subdivision is quite massive compared to anywhere else or most places in BC for rural acreage. And I just thought seems a little off to me, based on what we were saying at that, or my interpretation of what folks were saying up there. And like, maybe I read the room wrong, but
I mean, I can leave that as a comment, or I don't know if you want me to respond to it.
I don't know. Was that taken into account? I guess I don't know if you have a response to that, or if you know, but
well, I wasn't at that meeting. That would have been part of the OCP. So essentially, what I need to be taking from that is like what got translated into the OCP, which is the finalized document, which would have taken into account all those discussions. But then at some point there would have been essentially the end product, which is the 20 hectares if you're in the ALR, and then the 10 hectares if you're out for the rural properties.
Which goes to encouraging ALR use and encouraging a rural atmosphere, I guess, were the things in the OCP. I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was discussion of trying to go lower too, and I guess that didn't make it into the OCP, that part of the discussion. I guess I don't know how that decision was made, but okay. Well, that's my end. That's all I have to say.
Great, appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your question.
Unmute.
Yeah, I got you muted. You're good. Okay, next person, Christina and Randy Gilbert. You are live. But you just got to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear
you're
me?
good.
Yeah. I have some questions regarding core commercial 1 zoning. It looks like the new draft has outdoor storage is not permitted, where the old one was outdoor storage was allowed with a solid landscape screen. So I'm just wondering why the change, or like, we have 9 acres. I can't see not having any outdoor storage. And does that outdoor storage include storage of RVs when they're here, like we leave them out, they're allowed to leave them here seasonally in the winter, they're not living in them. Does that include like our front end loader? Like I'm just trying to figure out what would determine that and how that could be determined that we could not have any outdoor storage.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think what you're referring to is like it being listed as like an standalone permitted use, which the reason that it was taken out was because it wasn't listed in the OCP, and so I can take your comment. Like, I'm assuming that you're bringing it up because that's something that you want to have at least some outdoor storage available.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
No outdoor storage is ridiculous when you have a campground, a motel, and RV park, and 9 acres to, we have
Yeah.
equipment. We have, I understood the storage before with a solid landscape screen around it,
Mhm.
but to have 0 outdoor storage on this kind of property is impossible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment there. When you're talking about this outdoor storage, like it would be stuff that's like accessory to another business that's on the property. Not like
It just
not
says, the new one just says outdoor storage is not permitted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of what you're wanting to see out of the bylaw, like you're talking about like accessory storage to a business that's on the property, not
Yes,
like a
right.
business of providing outdoor storage.
Right, yes, no.
Yeah.
Related to
Okay.
the business, yeah.
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 Okay. Just to clarify, I'm not going to make any like commitments to changes, but as you bring things up, we're going to note them and then go back and review the bylaw, and each one of these comments I'll go back and see like if there's any conflict with the OCP in terms of how I'm doing that, and if there isn't, then I can have some room to make adjustments and modifications, but I can't make any promise. Like I'm not going to be making any promises at this meeting as to what I'm going to be doing, but I have noted that as something to go back to.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My other question would be the new signs. I wondered how that affected us in particular, I guess, just because you can see on our road, we already have 2 signs, like, and one sign has multiple businesses that belong to our property on it. And is that affected by your new signs? Bylaw, yeah.
Would
So there's 2. You have 2 signs per parcel, but literally we have like a pole that like a signage that has 4 businesses on that one signage, and then we have one for the motel. And of course around the corner we have another one, but yeah.
Sure, that's a pretty specific question. Do you mind like if I just follow up with that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sending, well, like giving me your contact information like through email, and then I can respond direct. Or I'll also, yeah, just because it's specific to a property, I'd want to look at that exact situation for you, but I can also provide like a general answer to that question when I do a general Q&A sheet that I'll publish for everybody. But if you want to send me your direct contact information with like the information as to what your like how many you have, I'll say that if you have the signs now, they would be allowed to be continued, like you wouldn't have to take them down. But I would want to give more clarification to you as to what would be allowed in the future. Yeah.
All right, that's everything for me. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. All right, we'll do next person in line is Mike Corbett. You are you just gotta unmute yourself before you talk.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. Just a couple quick questions. I see the setback requirements have changed. They're now 10. Can you just give is there any supporting documentation or any kind of information that we can look at that would provide me with some comfort to understand why it needs to move from 7.5 to 10 meters? And if you've got it and you can point me to it, then that's fine. But if you can give me some understanding around why that is, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So that 10 meters from the setback from Christina Lake was basically aligning with the 10-meter setback that the floodplain bylaw has. So it's meant to kind of curb expectations by aligning those two documents together.
I can appreciate that, but is there any kind of understanding as to why? Like, what is the reasoning behind that? Whether it's the floodplain or setbacks, like, and if you don't have the information now, that's fine. If you could post that on the website, that'd be great. But it'd help to get an understanding of how that's kind of come to be as fact.
So for this draft, it is as simple as trying to align it with the floodplain. In terms of like, if your question's more about like, where did the 10 meters in the floodplain bylaw come from?
Correct.
That was a compromise, I think, during the update. What kind of the provincial standard is 15, and so 10 was increasing.
So it's a bit of an arbitrary number.
I would say that
that's fine.
It's moving towards away from the lake, in terms of whether, like 10 or 11 or whatever. Yeah, you can say that it's an arbitrary number, but it was something that was more than what we had now, given, that we're trying to push things away from the lake. But a lot of the properties at Christina Lake really would be encumbered by 15, which is the provincial standard. So I'd just say that, like, from the floodplain perspective, it was a bit of a compromise. And then for this particular issue, we were just trying to basically mirror the floodplain bylaw. And I'll tell you that, if you're comfortable providing your comments on it, it was something that was quite a bit of a discussion, and a lot of people are concerned, and we've heard that they're concerned about any of the implications for people that are within that 7.5 to 10, and not wanting to make things more difficult within that area for existing buildings. So I don't know if you do want to provide any comments.
Yeah, it's this probably isn't the forum for it. There's a lot of people I see online that have questions, and I certainly don't want to occupy their time, but it is a bit of I think a bone of contention between the regional district, the planning process, the OCP, and people that own waterfront on the lake. There is a pretty big disconnect, generally speaking. And the fact that this meeting, and appreciative of the fact that there's a Zoom meeting, that there's nothing held in the summer when the majority of the lakefront people are available to have this conversation face to face is a little bit concerning. But I'll move on. I see in this new bylaw that there's a new dwellings. You've now got an EV mandate in place. Can you help me understand what that is?
Yeah, it's essentially to be EV ready for level 2 charging. So the idea behind that would be that it is a lot easier to put it in at the building stage at new than to do retrofits. So making it a requirements and just as a way of encouraging those electrical outlets to be able to have the capacity near a parking stall and making that
Okay, so
something.
who's
So it's
expected
not
to
the
pay
tr-
for
it's
that? Who's expected to pay for that?
that
If I
would
don't
be
plan on having a V and I want to build a new place, who's expected to pay for that expense?
that would be on the person like the owner. Yeah.
Right. So the regional district's adding more cost to someone that wants to build a new place at Christina Lake. Is that what I'm to understand?
There would be an additional cost to that.
Right. I don't have any other questions. Last question, sorry. So this is a draft. How does this get approved?
It is approved by the board of directors at a board of directors meeting through bylaw. So essentially, like the simplified process for a bylaw, like once we're done with these kind of more informal consultations, would be to go to our advisory planning commission. They review the document, and they can then goes to our electoral area services committee, which is a subcommittee of our board that's made up of all 5 of our electoral area directors, and they make a recommendation to our board of directors that if they're in support of it, it is read at is given readings, and then a public hearing set after second reading of the bylaw, and then it goes back for a third reading and adoption after getting signed off by the Ministry of Transportation.
So essentially, the regional district or this group could take this as is and move forward, regardless of the feedback from these public house or open meetings. Is that correct?
I'm going to be taking your comments into consideration. That's why we're here.
That doesn't answer my question. Like you could by just take this and take this to the regional district for vote as is, correct?
Yes. Like right. the regional district has the right to put forward any bylaws that it wants, I guess right. would be. So we're doing this consultation to try to get to the point where there's a lot of the kinks are worked out and we hear comments and concerns and can adjust before it gets to a formal public hearing stage.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, I'm just going to switch to a Q&A question. I know there's one about well, there's a couple here, but there's one about to clarify the EV charging requirements, since that was kind of on topic. So is a new home required to put in a charging station?
Not the EV equipment. It just needs to be EV ready with the electrical. So not the unit itself that would plug into your vehicle. It would be the electrical capacity to be ready for that energized outlet.
Perfect. I'll go back. I know Tim Burdett said, what is the RDKB's definition of low density? That is a Q&A.
I don't know if there is a actual definition provided. It'd be something that would be in the OCP. Typically, that term would be used as a descriptor, and then the densities based on subdivision and uses listed in each of the land use designations would be making up the hard and fast rules on what that is.
Perfect. I'll go back. There's kind of more comments just about the elevation floodplain setback. or zoning setback 10 meters, should the lake setback not be an elevation instead of an arbitrary distance back from the lake? And then there's one that says, yeah, when we have relatively steep slopes around the lake, 10 meters or 15 meters is pretty restrictive. We'll go back to Barry Walker. You're next. You are unmuted. Barry, you might have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find the unmute button. I have
You're good.
more of a comment and a request, if you will. My comment is there's a large percentage of homeowners who are seasonal. It would be really great if we could have these meetings maybe in a time that more of us are up there, July, August time. Because it's, like I said, it's a very large percentage of people, of homeowners who can't be on. This is great. I really appreciate you doing this meeting tonight, but it would be great if it was done at a time when we're available at the lake to do it in person. My request is if we can go back one screen, I can finish copying and pasting the website that you had up there. Thank you.
Oops. There you go. Yes, thank you, Barry. And that is a comment that we've heard, which is why we set up this meeting, because we work, year round, and we try to have meetings when people are around. It just timing wise, in terms of how things work out with our workloads, doesn't always align with when people are at the lake. So it's all I can say is that we'll do our best. We are trying to wrap this up. Hopefully, because we don't want to have these larger projects kind of out in the public close to the elections. So we'd hopefully have this wrapped kind of in the first half of the year as opposed to the later half of the year. But I do appreciate the comment, and we'll try to accommodate as best we can.
David, you're up next.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. First, I'll just make a comment about the EV charger. I have an electric vehicle in the city, and I charge it on 120, and it's fine everywhere I go. Certainly at the lake, it would probably be more than enough just to have a plug outdoors that you're able to plug into. I think that's a little bit of an onerous requirement from my perspective, but that's just a comment. I don't need a response on that. For the Section 306-6 of the previous bylaw had indicated that parcels can be subdivided if separated by a highway, and I can't see that in the new bylaws under Section 304, which is where subdivision is mentioned. Where has that been contemplated? Has that just been evaporated somehow, or where is that accounted for?
I believe that was something that was removed, probably just to remove as many exemptions from the subdivision standards as we can, but with that kind of directive that these areas are supposed to be meeting those general lot size requirements.
Yeah, understood. But property was acquired under a different set of bylaws that allowed for subdivision if it was separated by a road. So my comment would be I'd like to see that returned particularly for what was previously Natural Resource 1, but is currently, I guess, RR 1 now. And then also I am wondering about the dwelling setbacks. In the previous bylaws. NR1 zoning allowed for a dwelling unit to be closer than the setback of 25 meters when adjacent to specific properties. And in the new RR1 zoning, it specifies principal dwelling unit, is there any change in the regulation, or is it the same? Like, I had interpreted the previous setback to be not needed to be 25 meters as long as it was a dwelling unit, whether it's a secondary dwelling unit or a primary.
I don't want, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that one would be something that I can, again, kind of compare. And if you want to email, so I can get your contact information to follow up on that one, because it is quite specific, and I just want to go back and see where that direction was coming from. And because off the top of my head, I would say it would be meant for any dwelling unit, and it might just be how it was written. But I would want to follow up with that, with more concrete looking into before I told you that for certain.
Okay. And then just the last question I have is with regards to the principal uses that were associated with NR1 versus now RR1. There's obviously some additions like campgrounds and some other things. I think animal boarding was added, and things like primary use sawmill was removed. What's the intention of removing, or what's the intention of shuffling those things around? Is there an issue, for example, with primary use sawmill, which we have located on our NR1 property? I'm not sure what sort of caused those things to be removed and those other things to be added in.
Yeah, so those would have been coming from the listed uses in that land use designation from the OCP, and then translating that as best we could into the bylaw.
Okay, so that's specified in the OCP is the.
There's like each land use designation has like a list of kind of uses that it considers to be appropriate, and so any of those kind of use changes were based on what was listed there or not listed there.
Okay, and why was there changes to what was listed there and not listed there?
Like that would have been through the OCP process and the consultation with that. Yeah, but that is one, again, too, if you want me to look into that specifically further, I'm more than happy to do that too. As you can tell, I wanted to answer questions, but I also want to answer questions thoroughly. So, when I say I'd like more information or more time, I don't want to just blow it off with a off the top of my head comment. And so hopefully you can appreciate that I'm not trying to dodge the question. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you like a more detailed answer.
Yep, I appreciate that. I'd prefer the more detailed answer anyways. Yes, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'll go back to the Q&A for a couple here. Where we left off here. Aaron Perkins says, what was the thoughts behind removing the secondary dwelling in RR1? When a time that the province is asking that we increase density, would we remove this option? I think that's regarding the single family dwelling on a parcel of 20 hectares or greater.
Yeah, I think that's referring to like currently when you have enough room to be able to subdivide, and you're allowed to have 2 dwelling units as opposed to 1 on a parcel, and then the change just allows 1 per parcel. And that was done with essentially the intention that it's viewed that the OCP and the way that the bylaw is structured is that a single family dwelling is 1 per parcel, not 2 per parcel or more per parcel. And then if you want to have additional units, you'd be going through the subdivision process, which would enable review of that and provide the benefits of having separate ownership and development that isn't that it essentially can be separated and has gone through the review of, say, things like road access and things like that the ministry would require as part of the subdivision process.
Okay, and another one from the Q&A says Cody Zorn said retaining walls, section 303.2 states wall height must be measured from finished grade, then also says from the base of the wall footing. Please clarify this.
Yes, so the retaining walls are meant to be from the base of the retaining wall. So if there is a contradiction, I think we'd have to go back and adjust that. But I welcome any comments if there's a particular concern on that one. I'd welcome comments on direction, but would want to go back and make sure that there isn't a contradiction there.
Okay. And then Tim Burdett said it's possible to get a steering committee member to speak to some of these restrictive changes and why they were proposed, but that's kind of outside the scope of this. I don't know if any steering committees members are here right now. Next, we'll go to, I guess, David was next in line. It looks like. Sorry, is that David that just spoke? I think that's David that already spoke.
Yeah, that was me that just spoke.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All good. Sorry, I was gonna get you out of the queue here. Next is Grant. Right. You're good, Grant. You just gotta unmute yourself.
There you go.
Yep, you're good.
I have a couple things to bring up to you. On October 1st, we had that planning meeting on, I think it was 95 or 96% that people didn't want the RV thing to have those dates in there. I see you took it from 406.1 and they mysteriously now appear in 410. Same rules with different numbers. What's the point of that? Like everybody at that meeting, 21 of the 22 people there didn't want it. Now you just changed where you put it in the papers from 406 to 410. That's one of them. Why was that happening?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm waiting for your response.
I'm not sure about the shuffling. That's probably just an adjustment to the bylaw, but that was a topic that I wanted more discussion on, which is why I kind of kept it in to continue to get comments on that. So, and there has been lots of comments from the meeting last night and so on, but there is a concern with people staying in RVs. Like there is a concern from the regional district's perspective about people living in RVs and how that's sanctioned. So that's why, despite the comments that we received at the open house, it was remaining in there as a way for us to have a enforcement lever if need be. So appreciate that there's lots of people that are in just disagreement on that.
Okay, then have you ever looked at other districts, how they deal with this? It's like you go to the East Kootenays, like Rosen Lake, Ty Lake, Jaffrey area, basically the same thing as your nice lakes, golf courses, everything. They even have a thing in there that if an RV, they can have up to 2 RVs on a lot as long as they have their own approved septic system. Like with everybody looking for housing now, you think we'd be doing something to help people find a house that's cheaper rather than just kicking everybody in the balls and telling them to go away. Okay, that's the other one is the derelict vehicles. On your thing, you say you quote the Motor Vehicle Act as unlicensed. Do you mean uninsured or a wreck?
It would be uninsured.
Well, uninsured doesn't mean it's derelict. It just means maybe the person's parking it because he can't afford to insure it right now.
Actually, you know what? I'd have to look that up just under the definition of the derelict vehicle, because
Definition of the derelict vehicle is uninsured by the Motor Vehicle Act. It's an uninsurable vehicle, a vehicle that's torn for parts or scrap vehicle. It's nothing about uninsured or unlicensed.
yeah. So sorry, it said uninsurable. Yeah, yes. So
But
that would be yeah, see, going off the top of my head, I'm kind of getting mixed between our current and our draft. Do you want to tell me what your concern is? Like, then I can go back to the draft and try to address it.
I got a 32-foot motorhome sitting right now that's not licensed, not insured, but I can insure it any day I want when I need it. It's not a derelict vehicle. It runs, it starts, it moves. It does everything, but I'm just not insuring it. So it's not a derelict vehicle. Like under your Motor Vehicle Act, it's not classed as a derelict vehicle because it's insurable.
Yes. Yeah, I think the language in there is insurable, not insured. And I think that, but I just would want to double check on that. So I'm not giving you that off the cuff advice on that. But I am planning on doing a Q&A sheet in follow up to these meetings and posting it. So I will include that as one of the questions and then give an answer on that. In that sheet.
The other thing, like I got that motorhome. When my family comes here, our house is too small because when we retired, we downsized. They stay in my motorhome. Like they spent the Christmas week there. So by your new bylaws, that's going to be illegal.
It would be during that period that it could be enforced.
And see, that's why most people didn't want those dates in there.
Yeah.
Because when people come to Christina Lake, most of them are downsizing. They haven't got the room for family to come and stay. And do we get to vote on this package?
It's not a vote. It's something that we take in comments and try to accommodate and gain consensus. But essentially, the push comes to shove, it's up to our board of directors to decide what they want in their bylaws.
So the taxpayers don't get a final say on what your new laws become.
We don't live in a democracy anymore.
Yeah, it's through your representative of your electoral area directors.
She don't like most of us anyway.
If that's it, then before we get off the rails, is that if that's all for questions, I'll move on to
one other question. You're parking for and storage of large vehicles over 5,500. There's like in a Cascade in the very first 100 yards of Christina Lake down there. There's 7 people I know that vehicles they can't park in their lots anymore.
So that number increased. So there was a restriction. I think it was 4,500, and then it was increased to align with the class of vehicles. So like the change of that is the weight going up. So it's right now, if they're not meeting that, that wouldn't change under this bylaw.
So then that's what I'm saying. They can't park on their own property anymore once this bylaw comes into effect.
What I'm saying is that rule is in place right now. That's more restrictive than what's in the draft.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thanks, Grant. Next is David Mary. You are up.
Thank you. A question about setback for retaining walls, which I firmly object to for my own property and for a number of properties on the waterfront as well. The setback is now 10 meters from the natural boundary. I do have a permitted retaining wall on the natural boundary, primarily because the natural boundary was being eroded away and it would take some time, but over 25 or 30 years, the front of my house would start to fall into the lake. The properties that are on the lakefront need the ability to protect their natural boundary. With the new riparian rules, we won't be able to repair our properties from when the erosion occurs. So if we can't repair our properties and we can't protect our properties, how are we going to prevent damage to homes that are, even if they're on the proper setbacks, that's going to happen. I had a 150-year-old cedar tree have its roots eroded out, and it fell on my house because there was the beach wall that was there had fallen down and wasn't replaced. And the erosion caused this to happen. And this is what's going to happen to other properties as well on the foreshore. If we can't protect or repair our foreshore, then houses are going to fall into the lake. So I'd appreciate your comments on that. As I said, and the other question along with that is, what do they mean by grandfathering? Is as I said, I do have a permitted retaining wall on the natural boundary, and it was permitted after inspection of the property by an engineer who defined the natural boundary, and that's where I placed the wall. So if the wall starts to fall down, what do you mean by grandfathering? Am I allowed to repair that wall when it would be technically not conforming?
Thanks for the question. So in terms of repairs, that is allowed through grandfathering provisions. Replacing the wall would require further approvals of being in that setback area. And I don't know if this applies to your scenario or not, but I just want to say that in the bylaw, retaining walls are over 1.22 meters in height. So a lot of the walls kind of along the lake shore tend to be under that height, in which case they are considered to be a landscaping features that are allowed within that setback area.
Okay, so you're saying if it's under 1.22 meters, that would not be considered a retaining wall?
Yes.
And under the riparian rules, would that, if I had a 1.2 meter, or I'm thinking particularly of new property owners or people who don't currently have retaining walls, but their property, their foreshore needs to be protected. It's not really the foreshore, the water above the natural boundary needs to be protected because high water will invade that and erode that without protection. Is that going to be allowed?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the future because the riparian area, in terms of that development permit area, that project is on pause, not implemented, and I don't know what if that project does move forward, what the outcome would be. But that would be something that would be another public process as to what that outcome is. So right now we don't have a riparian area development permit that would be limiting like landscaping or anything like that along the lake. So I can't really speak to what might happen in the future as part of a different process. But for now, those landscaping items are like if it's basically a landscaping wall, which is can be a retaining wall as long as it's less than 1.22 meters in height. then that's allowed in that setback area.
Okay, so would a retaining wall that was less than one, or not a retaining wall, a landscaping wall be less than less than 1.22 meters in height? Does that require a permit to put
No.
in under the current rules? Before it will probably if riparian rules come in, but under the bylaws as they're written now, could somebody just put in that wall without a permit at this point?
Yes, and it doesn't require a building permit either. So no planning permit, no building permit, no required engineering.
Okay, great. And I just had one other question. This is kind of a minor thing, but under accessory dwelling unit 402, it says maximum floor area 90 square meters.
Mm-hmm.
But in residential 1, 602.3, it says maximum floor area 170 square meters.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, what section was that?
Or accessory dwelling unit 402
mm-hmm.
says 90 square meters maximum floor area.
Yep.
602.3 says maximum floor area 170 square meters.
I'm just gonna see if I can quickly bring that up. Just give me 1 second here. I'm trying to find that section. 602. Oh, that one was just specifically for an accessory building for Fairland Strata, not an accessory dwelling unit. And that's kind of a specific scenario for Moody Creek Estates that was part of the other bylaw and then kind of merged into this one. So it does that section that it's the 90 square meters that would be applicable for the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, great. Last question, maximum height lesser of 7 meters. Is it the lesser of 7 meters or 2 stories on an accessory dwelling unit?
Yeah, yes.
So 7 meters, that's 21 feet. To put 2 stories with your roof, a peaked roof, isn't going to fit under 7 meters.
Yeah, so that's a pretty significant increase from what's allowed right now, which is 4.6. So are you saying that you think it needs to be accommodated for pitch?
Yeah, 2 stories won't fit under a peaked roof at 7 meters.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 21 feet, 22 feet. So because I have an accessory building, a permitted accessory building right now with a unit on top of the garage. And it's definitely over 7 meters. I don't see how any 2-story building would fit under 7 meters.
Yeah, I think I was basing that on the last couple of applications that we had for these types of scenarios because the variance is required because of the current height being the 4.6. But that's something like to accommodate a pitched roof. That's something that we might want to make an allowance for to make it so that they don't have to come in for variances to allow for that.
Yep. Okay.
Great,
thanks.
thank you.
Thanks very much. That's all I had. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, David.
I don't know how many more hands we have up.
We got 9, but we can. I know we're 15 minutes past time, but we can. Joanne, if you're okay, 15 more minutes. I'll just ask that everyone keep it, kind of keep it quick, essentially.
Yeah, we can keep it quick, and then I'd also say that if we don't get to everybody's questions, we can email them in or put them on the join the conversation page so that everybody can see them. And so I don't want to not answer anybody's questions, but I'd also want to be cognizant of everybody's time and in this meeting.
Yeah. If anyone that has their hands up has like a property specific question, I'd probably direct that to Joanne to email her directly about that. If it's more about kind of, I guess, the bylaw in general, that would, I guess, keep your questions to that if possible. And try to just keep it a little quicker and just be aware that there's a couple people behind you. Hillary, you are next.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I just want to thank both of you for putting this on and hosting it. I really appreciate it. I have a couple question, comment, but they're all related and they get to my bigger overarching one. So a secondary dwelling, can I live in that all year round?
You mean like an accessory dwelling unit?
Mm-hmm.
Or like a suite? Yes.
Okay.
It's a dwelling unit.
Okay, so if I buy a brand new RV, it's small, I put it behind my house, you can't see it from the road. What makes the difference between that and a secondary dwelling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from our perspective, a dwelling unit is something that meets the BC Building Code or the alternatives that are exempt from the BC Building Code. So manufactured homes that have the CSA, like a manufactured home standard for year-round living, and RVs don't meet those classifications.
Okay, so why was the limit 6 months and not 4 or 8? Like, was it just picked randomly?
The 6 months rule is something that is currently in the bylaw, so that I didn't make a change to it being seasonal, so allowed up to 180 days per year is what the bylaw currently says. So that 6 month rule has just been a longstanding rule at Christiana Lake for our staying in RVs, and that was meant to like cover the whole season essentially. The specifying the months of the year in the bylaw was something that was put in so that there would be a period of time for situations where there's complaints that our bylaw officer is looking to act on, that it would make them easier to be able to enforce within that specified period.
Okay. Because I know someone commented about having it over Christmas, and yeah, I have a family member who doesn't come up in the summer, they only come in the winter. So for them, like, that doesn't fully make sense, but that's okay. So if I buy a property and I want to build a retaining wall, and I decide that I'm going to put it in 3 meters from the water line, I was told by a few different staff at the regional district that if I did that, they would come out, they wouldn't make me remove it, they would take a look at it, see if we can work around it. And if we can't, they would then just survey and accept the new wall. So then I also asked, following that one with these conversations, okay, say I get a stop work permit on my whatever I'm doing. I was told that if I just stop during the summer and wait until the off season, I can finish the work. And again, when the regional district comes to sign off on it, they'll look, can we work together? No, they're not going to make me rip up whatever I've done. But there's no really recourse. So my question is, if you can't manage the current bylaws, how can you manage the proposed changes to it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a tough question because I'm not really privy to what these conversations were that sound like something that, you know, even if they were said, maybe they shouldn't have been said. But I would say what our goal is to have bylaws that are enforceable, not that they are going to be every exact thing is going to be enforced upon, but that we have the tools available to enforce. And so that's kind of specifically for the RV situation. We were trying to get our bylaw officer to be able to have the tools to be able to enforce on those situations. But just to kind of maybe backtrack and provide a little bit more context in terms of how the regional district handles bylaw enforcement in general. There's kind of two parts, one being violations of building, like our building bylaw, in which case if we see something, there's an obligation to act on it because especially if there's an unsafe condition. In terms of things in a zoning bylaw, there is a policy in place, so essentially it's complaint driven. So if somebody builds something that is in the setback, maybe doesn't require a permit, we would only act on enforcing that through a complaint driven process. So going back to the RV, someone coming and staying over Christmas, that would be something that we'd only investigate that if there was a complaint, and you know that problem probably would be solved by the time we were able to act on bylaw enforcement in that situation.
Okay, and then just one final thing: how many bylaw officers are there for the regional district?
We have 2.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Next, Suzanne, you are up. Just gotta unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I have a question with regards to land use in agricultural or in areas that are in the ALR. So I thought that I had read somewhere that logging is no longer permitted on ALR land, and I can't find it now. But I'm hoping you guys can confirm whether or not that is true. And yeah, do you know what I'm talking about there?
Yeah, I think there is something in there about various forestry activities. I think that was a comment that came from our comments that we received from the Agricultural Land Commission. I'm going to just note that because that's kind of a general question. I'm just going to note that one, and then I'm going to follow up in the that Q&A sheet that I'm going to be publishing, if that's okay with you. Just
sure, and I'll just let you know that my concern there is that we have land in the ALR. We have trees on our land in the ALR. If we would like to use it for agricultural purposes, we're going to have to clear trees.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not allowed to do that, you're basically rendering the land useless, which isn't something that we really want.
Yeah, and I can say right now that wouldn't have been the intent of that, and there are provisions in there about in the bylaw in a separate section about basically being able to log your own property. So I'll respond to both of those in that Q&A, just being cognizant of time.
Yeah, you bet. My final question is, I'm just wondering if we're having issues with the regional district and not getting what we want as far as questions and answers and or proper representation, what are our next steps? because it feels sometimes like we hit a wall trying to get through to the regional district. So can you guys let us know, like, what happens after that? Who can we speak to that's that could help us?
Are you talking about this process in particular, or is this more like a general?
Yeah, just in
process?
general and in this process, you know, if we find that we're not being heard, then where do we go?
Okay, well, I mean, hopefully you're feeling heard now. But I would say, you know, we can, like, if you want to talk to me directly, if it's something about this bylaw that you think is being ignored, you can talk to me. And then if, you know, you don't think that, that things are happening on my level, there would be the manager of planning and development, Donna Dean, which would be my, who I report to. And then there would also be your local electoral area director, Grace McGregor.
And is there anything beyond that?
Some people go to the CAO if you want to talk to Mark Anderson. But yeah, I guess it depends on what you're being unsatisfied, like what the dissatisfaction
what the nature of the
is.
concern is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I get it. And for the record, I think that this information was really good. So I appreciate what you guys have put forward here. I do think that I have concerns in other areas. It's just sometimes hard to get an answer. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll add on to that too. Just that triggered that the town hall meetings that are coming up for each of the areas does draw, you know, basically a lot of senior management and the area director to attend, and those town halls is essentially the time to talk about those kind of bigger issues. Like they present, you know, and tell everybody what essentially they're doing in your area after as part of like the budget and work plan process for the year. So the town hall is one venue, but that's like a public venue, but there's also just reaching out to those individuals at any point in time.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Try to keep this quick here. We got like 5 minutes. Try to go. We got 6 more people. Greg, if you can keep it quick, thank you very much. Unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, in respect of your time, realizing that you're providing it for your time past the allotted, so thanks for that. I appreciate that. I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'm not going to ask a bunch of questions. I'm just going to ask one. Does the RDKB undertake a cost study to understand the financial impacts of the proposed changes in the bylaws?
Quick answer is no.
Okay, and why not?
I don't think I have I don't have a answer for that. It's just not part of our practice, and I don't know if there is a mechanism really to do that in terms of anticipating, like, I'm assuming you're thinking about the anticipated cost to people that wish to develop under the new regulations.
Right. I'm basically, you know, I think we have a major problem with methanol and drugs issues, and we got a housing crisis, and we have a cost of building crisis, and yet I continue to see increase in bylaws that just add on and slather on costs, process, even, you know, requiring engineers and stamps and all these things that just have made it so that it is so fundamentally expensive to do anything, that we were no longer investing in those areas. So I just flagged that as a concern, that I think that we need to look at cost versus benefit in this process, and there seems to be an absolute lack of that. So again, I appreciate your time for making yourself available, but I just think that there should be a discussion on cost versus benefit and impact on, the reality is matters if we could have kids working on projects, they could live there and they'd be part of the economy. But because we have to do so many things that reduce those costs, we don't have that boost to the economy.
Great. Yep. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Lillian, you're next. Just gotta unmute yourself.
Maybe just go to the next one while we're sorting that out.
Yep. Ted, you're next.
Hello. I first want to thank you guys so much for putting this on for this online meeting. It's really helpful, and a second thank you for staying longer than you might have otherwise wanted to. So thank you very much. It's important. Nowhere in the building in a setback info sheet or the zoning information that you provided is the riparian area development permit guidelines. In the info sheet, you've got the floodplain and the zoning. Is that independent of the riparian area setback and rules, or is it the same?
Yeah, so the riparian area development permit area is not something that's in effect right now, so that's why it's not included. It's a project that is on hold, so I don't know what the outcome of that would be, if anything, if that ever is going to be going forward. So it's currently not, so that's why it's not included. And
okay.
If something does happen with that, you would have the same kind of public meeting and notifications like that you would get for this one. So yes, it is a separate project, and I didn't mention it because I'm not sure what the outcome of that project would be and what the implications would be. As you probably know, or maybe don't, through the OCP process, it was taken out of the OCP because of it being controversial and set aside as separate, and then it's still kind of been sitting as this this project in waiting, and so I didn't know
Okay, so
what information to include because it's not adopted and it's not something that is implemented at this point in time.
Understood. So,
yep.
As you're going and trying to make yet another layer of zoning rules, which is, you're able to do that under the Government Act, I strongly urge you on page 4 to remove the reference to minor repairs. And here's why. The biggest risk to Christina Lake is a fire. And if you don't allow homeowners, particularly the ones on the lake, to replace their roofs with metal roofs, replace their siding with cement siding, replace their decks with non-flammable decking material, when a fire comes through, those homes are going to burn. And when those homes are going to burn, when it rains, you're going to have 10 times more chemicals go into the lake than you ever would. We'll lose a generation of lake health by being so restrictive and punitive with the way that your repairs is worded in the info sheet. So throughout, the rest of it is consistent with the riparian area development permit exemptions, and I strongly suggest you follow those so as not to create more crisscross between objectives. But it's so important to allow people, particularly fire smart, and the way you've got things written with having to get QEPs involved when people are following Fire Smart. It's not well thought out. So please put some more thought into it, and please allow people to do the things to their homes that'll make them less susceptible to fire. Thank you. That's all I got.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. I just want to just say, like, I appreciate those comments. We have been hearing a lot about, you know, people and the concerns about the restriction when you're too close to the lake in the setback area. That info sheet isn't proposing anything new. That's kind of our existing scenario. So it was put out for information to kind of clarify to people what the expectation was. So it's not something that we're proposing that's how it's going to be. That was just an info sheet of what our process is currently.
So it's already baked into policy?
Yeah, so the change there would, from the perspective of this zoning bylaw update, would be the 10 meters versus keeping the 7.5 meter setback to avoid having a variance. But any of the rules around like needing a floodplain exemption when you're within the 10 meters and when you're in a setback, regardless of what that setback is, that process is essentially how it's laid out from the Local Government Act and how
You're absolutely right on all of that, but it's to have to engage professionals if you wanted to replace a window.
Yeah.
If you wanted to put fireproof siding on your house, you have to spend $20,000-$30,000 worth of professionals, engineering and QEPs just to do that, to make your home less susceptible to fire. I think it has to be just consistent with what the real trying to mitigate where the real risks to the community are, and it's fire. Everybody knows that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Joanne, what's your feel? 4 more questions, or are you tapped out?
I think that yeah, if I would say if people want to maybe email their questions in, then I can publish them with like that Q&A sheet that I was talking about, or you can post questions on Join the Conversation, and then other people would be able to see the question and answers there. And it looks like we've only got 3 people left in the room. So I just maybe want to give another 5 minutes to have for them to have a quick say before maybe we wrap it up in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, we're 40 minutes over time. So last 3 people, please keep it quick. Scout, you are up.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate the building and setbacks info sheet. I think that was really necessary to clarify kind of what was happening. So thanks so much. Quickly, on page 3, I see it was spelled out, the development variance permit and whatnot. So just have a real concern about the cost of all of this. So for example, because we are moving from 7.5 to 10 meters, that's going to capture a whole bunch of different properties that weren't previously in that. So, for example, building on what Ted was saying, there's a window that fails in the baking heat of the summer, or there's a door that needs to be replaced. So that may require a $500 investment for a new window or a new door. But what I'm seeing here is that I need to apply for a development variance permit, site-specific floodplain, bylaw exemption that is going to require an engineering report, an engineering flood assurance statement, and if successful, I then need to go to some type of legal avenue to register the covenant on my home title. So is there any consideration possible to be given to like a cost amount, that if we're just like, if something's going to be minor repairs, not just painting and patching. Like I really appreciate that that's been laid out, but minor repairs could be like a $500 door or a $500 window. And as I see it right now, again, moving from 7.5 to 10, we're going to be capturing a whole bunch more property that is going to cost perhaps $10, $20, $30,000 for like a $500 fix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and it's a difficult issue, and I absolutely recognize that as being a difficult issue in terms of what we can do about that particular issue. Like it comes down to how non-conforming buildings are managed under the Local Government Act. So like I'm not kind of empowered to make any changes to that on my level or even as part of this zoning process. The only part that could possibly change coming out of the zoning bylaw update would be whether there could be some sort of like if we hear from people that the 7.5 to 10 is a problem. It's just probably more for existing buildings than new buildings. Then maybe there's something that we can do to not make that situation worse. But in terms of how we're dealing with those non-conforming situations in the floodplain, it's a separate and very important issue. But I can't make any promises on that end in terms of making changes that way. I'm just not empowered to do that as part of this process.
Okay, that's disappointing to hear that it's not part of the process because, like I said, anyways, good. Thank you so much. I'll email some more.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and looks like last one is Jeff. You're live. You just gotta unmute yourself. Okay,
Jeff, are you there? That doesn't look like maybe he's already left, perhaps, or could pop a question into the Q&A if its mic's not working. But it looks like that might be the last person in the room.
Hi, is it working now?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Now? Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find it. I'll go as quickly as I can. Hi, Joanne. Thanks for doing this. And most importantly, thanks for doing it in track changes so we can see what changes have been made. That's extremely helpful and mandatory in this day and age. I'd like to reiterate what several others have said, which is that we should be having a meeting in the summer. There's no rational reason for saying, well, we just got to get this done. It could be done in the summer where more people can participate, and it's a shame that you're not going to do that. And you say, well, sometimes this happens. To be honest, it always happens. So I'll go on to some specific questions. In section 305, there's the setback table. And one of the things that you talk about is a structure buried underground is not permitted in the setback from the natural boundary. I don't understand that. It wouldn't be visible to anybody. And, as an example, there could be a block of concrete someone wants to bury as an anchor for a wharf system or whatever. So what's the rationale for that?
Structure just completely buried underground. Yeah, I mean, in this next reiteration, like I was, that's something that I think we could probably adjust. And I think that the rationale of not including it in this would just be that that disturbance area close to the lake. And then and then probably maybe not wanting to go to 100% to allow room for there to be room to work on the property without extending into the lake.
So Joanne, don't confuse the riparian stuff that's still to come with a zoning regulation that you're trying to do now, okay? If there's a problem with doing something like that and disturbance, that's going to come into play when you do the riparian guidelines that you may say are paused, but they're coming. So please try to separate the issues of zoning and the other issues that are still to come, because there's no rational reason to not allow something that's completely buried underground 33 feet from a natural boundary, okay? Secondly, in sections I and L, you say things like utility infrastructure, including poles, wires, and boxes and pump houses. There's no real definition for this stuff, so I want to make sure that people aren't going to look at things and say the only thing that is utility infrastructure are poles, wires, and boxes. Normally, when you write this stuff, you say including but not limited to. You need to put that in so we do not have fights all the time as to whether something is utility infrastructure or not. By the way you've written it, it seems to be restricting what is utility infrastructure. And I'll give you an example. A buried pipe is utility infrastructure. And it's not said there, and I don't want to have fights about that. That also applies to L, at-grade landscaping features, including patios, pavers, paving, and landscaping walls. Great that you've now included it as an exception, but there's not a definition of landscaping. So I want to make sure that people aren't going to say, no, landscaping is only patios, pavers, and paving. It's not a rock, or it's not this or that. Can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, I'm taking notes on that, and I think those are things that can be adjusted.
Okay. I had written a question in the earlier during the conversation and asked about tents, temporary tents and picnic tables, that kind of stuff. Again, by your definitions, a tent, and I'm talking about maybe an awning that is put up for a wedding for 1 day or 2 days, or a picnic table that someone actually wants to put in their 33 feet, that is meant to stay all the time. It might not be temporary. And it seems that it...
I think you cut out there.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff, I think you cut out.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you cut
out
there for a moment.
Yeah, I'm in a different country right now, and the internet's not that good. So did you get my question?
You started talking about temporary tents and picnic tables.
Yeah.
But I didn't get a question.
Oh, so what it looks like under the bylaw, you're not allowed to put up a temporary tent, an awning or something for a wedding within 33 feet of the waterfront. Is that your intent, that that's not permitted?
I would say that the bylaws in terms of what a structure is meant to be broad enough for enforceable things, but those wouldn't be things that we would be enforcing on.
Well, you might not be enforcing on it, but the bylaw says you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
that kind of stuff, I think, needs to be taken. Don't make people do things that are illegal simply because you say, well, we probably won't enforce that. Let people know what they can and can't do. A picnic table, somebody might want to build a picnic table within 33 feet of their waterfront so they can enjoy their waterfront. That's not something that should be precluded. I don't know that you can say that's a landscaping item. But it would be under your definition of structure, a structure. So, what's the rationale for not allowing that? And don't go to riparian, because you can cover that in the riparian when you get to that?
Yeah, I'd say typically we're structuring the bylaws in our benefit for situations that are adverse by having a broad definition of what a structure is. And
so
and you can't have an exhaustive list of every single scenario as to, you know, if somebody puts a picnic table or, you know, a pool toy or whatever. Like there is some sort of level of I don't want to say common sense, but it's just general interpretation that of when something is or isn't a building and is or isn't an issue. But I understand that you want enough clarity in the bylaw to know what you can and can't do, but that's the rationale for why we would have a broad definition, because we can't anticipate everything.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your side and where you're coming from, but you also have to appreciate the landowners that have had for 100 years or however long they've been at the lake, the ability to put up a picnic table and enjoy their lakefront. And you're now actually making that illegal. And that is not right in my view. In part 2 admin, there's a new section talking about access to the property by inspectors, by planners, by law enforcement. I don't know the history of what's currently allowed, but are you broadening the ability for by law enforcers or planners like yourself to just walk on our property and do an inspection when you deem you'd like to do that? Or is that currently permitted under our zoning bylaws, the charter, whatever?
Yeah, it's currently permitted. There might be some wording adjustments, but that isn't like a new provision.
Okay. So I would strongly recommend you do not make this more intrusive than what you're currently allowed. If you're currently allowed to do something, then you don't need to add stuff in a bylaw. If you're making it, you know, maybe planners weren't permitted in the other language. Now you're broadening how many people can actually walk onto our property whenever they feel like it, unannounced.
Yeah, it's not broadening it.
Well, that's all I'm saying is if you've got the rights, that's fine. I'm not going to try to.
Oh, sorry, Jeff, you cut out again.
Cut out again, but I think I'm back now.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So anyhow, you've got my point there, and I'm almost done. So just try to bear with me if you would, please. There's new guidelines.
If you have like these are pretty specific, and we've been on this meeting for quite a while. Like, is it okay if we either follow up maybe next week with a one-on-one conversation, or you want to email me those comments and we can talk them through?
I'd like to have maybe 3 more minutes. There's, I think, 29 people still here that I'd like them to hear it. That's the purpose of these public meetings, is for other people to hear things as well. So can you give me 3 more minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. In the new guidelines that you've got that talk about what is permitted in the exclusions, it's a separate document, guidelines for building within a setback area.
Mm-hmm.
That does not appear to be tied legally into the zoning bylaw. I can't find anything in the zoning bylaw that says that document is considered part of the legal zoning bylaw. So what that means is when you enact this bylaw, you can change any of that stuff willy-nilly whenever you want.
Yeah, so it's not tied to the bylaw. That info sheet is an info sheet about what our current processes are. And that's rooted in the Local Government Act, and then communicating that because it was a question that kept reoccurring. So it was it's a supplemental document for information purposes.
Right. So what you're telling people is don't worry about grandfathering. It's covered in this document. but we may take all that away without any kind of public input because it's not part of the bylaw.
That's
So
not what I.
that stuff on grandfathering, that part on grandfathering should be actually put into the bylaw.
It's in the Local Government Act. That's where it's coming from.
I hear what you're saying. So what you're telling people is trust us. If you're grandfathered, it may be for a year or 2 years or whenever we decide to change that without a public meeting, because that document can be changed
So
without
that's
any kind of.
it's an information document. The Local Government Act is not something that we can change.
No, so is all the grandfathering that's there already, we're permitted to do that regardless under the Government Act?
Yeah, so the Local Government Act has a section about non-conforming citing. So all of that info sheet is basically laying out the interpretation of what that equates to for people that have buildings that are within the setback at Christina Lake.
Okay, so as an example, I'm looking at the exceptions and it talks about pavers. And it says pavers are allowed, or utility infrastructure is allowed. You can change that later without going back into a public meeting like we're talking about going to with this bylaw. Above grade stairs is an example, right? That kind of stuff.
So I think you're talking about the citing exceptions in the zoning bylaw now, not the info sheet about grandfathering.
Yeah. Okay, and then one last one. This is my last question. There is some information in here that it says whether you're legal, non-conforming, or grandfathered, it goes back to whether you were permitted to do it in the past. And one of the problems is that in the past, a structure had a different definition than it does now. A building has a different definition than it does now. So how are you going to be consistent in this? It says, you know, if your building was constructed or your structure complied at the time, that was a different definition back then. For instance, many things did not require permits at all back then because they weren't really a building. Does that mean that we just have to come to you and prove that that was the case? And you're not going to worry about whether it was a building back then or it's a building now or a structure back then? Or
yeah, it would be the bylaw of the day. And then it would be, so it would be based on the bylaw of the day whenever that was constructed. And then in terms of figuring out when that was constructed, that proof of which bylaws or lack of bylaws that applied at that time would be based on the proof of when that building or structure was put in place.
Okay, so what you're telling us is if somebody built a ramp, and by the way, I'm talking about for other people, I don't even have a ramp, but if people had built a ramp after 1966, and that ramp would not have required a building permit, which they didn't, or any other kind of a permit, all you have to do is go in there and say, I'm rebuilding this because it was permitted back then, because it didn't require a permit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I'll just throw out, like, say something was built in 1964 and you provide proof, like reasonable proof that it was built in 1964, then we would be applying the rules of 1964 for evaluating that legal non-conforming status.
Sorry, I'm talking about something built in 1980 that would not have required a building permit under your definitions of structures or whatever.
Yeah, so it'd be we would be applying from the standards from 1980.
Okay, and so then you would be allowed to replace it without a building permit, without a variance permit because of the zoning, because you can't do it now. Right, because I'm talking about something that might be 3 feet high, not the 2-foot limit that you've got as an example. You'd be able to replace that, maintain it, replace it without a building permit.
No. So the nonconformity is about repairing what you have, not replacing what you have. But
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna
something's
say,
done.
if you want to continue this conversation,
Yeah,
then
we're
we're
past our
at
3
9 o'clock.
minutes.
I've given you more
Yeah.
than your 3 minutes, and I do want to wrap things up. Like, I don't want to cut you off. I am available for another conversation, but I also want to wrap things up.
Okay, and that was my last question anyhow, so thanks for
Perfect.
sticking around to do that. Can you, how many people attended altogether? 40 something?
Yeah, I
Do you
think
have that number?
I think, like, I didn't write it down, but yeah, I think the peak was around 45 or so.
Okay, I think that's showing you that there's a lot of interest in this. And I really encourage you to consider doing something in the summer on this. There's a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. On that note, thank you. And thanks to everybody else that stayed this whole time to listen to the discussion. Like I said before, the recording will publish on the Join the Conversation, and I'll be merging some of the questions and answers from the in-person session with this session as just the Q&A document. And in the coming weeks, we'll have a kind of what we heard from everybody from both of those kind of combined and then shared back to you. And we'll be working on some more revisions to the draft document. And I appreciate everybody's just awesome engagement, and I really appreciate it. And we'll sign off on that note and hope that everybody has a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming.